Hey guys, how you all doing? Mr. Giant here. Now, I did a video on the Scotland-England border, and it was this really cool little story about how two small towns on either side sort of resolved the who would control a certain patch of land. I'm going to link that video in the description so that you all could check that out. That got me interested in knowing more about the Scotland-England border because we know there got to be wars or something, some kind of major conflict going on there. This one that I'm going to watch here is called How War Started on the Scotland-England Border. So we're going to go ahead and YouTube and simmer and see how this war started. You know what I mean? How two small towns could say, let's play a football game, see who control this patch of land. Hey, I'm going to take this by force. Let's go.
My name is Bruce Fumi, and thanks to the nice people at Perthshire Camper Hire, I am on an historical journey along the Scottish-English border. And today, I want to take you to a castle. It's one of the most important castles in Scottish history. It's where the fate of Scotland was to be decided. Indeed, the decisions made here are still a topic of discussion and debate to this day. But it's not even in Scotland, because that is Scotland, on the opposite bank of the River Tweed. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. Can you imagine what this castle would have been like in its pomp, imposing its magnificence as it cast a watchful and yet confident eye over the River Tweed to Scotland beyond? If you'd been here in May 1291, the castle would have been a hubbub of activity, with all the pomp of a royal visit. Edward I, King of England, was in town. Yeah, he was actually alright at this stage. Actually, at this point, it seemed that Scotland and England were quite matey. Edward's sister had been married to Alexander III of Scotland, so recently deceased. Relations were actually okay. That's why Edward was here. Across on the other bank, there would have been an equally splendid circus of pageantries. The community of the realm of Scotland gathered in its finery. Tents, horses, banners, I'm sure, would have flown in that field. It would have been the biggest three-ring circus that the area would have seen in many a year. The reason that they'd come south, the reason that Edward had come north, was to resolve a problem that the Scots trusted Edward to adjudicate. When Alexander died, his only surviving heir was his wee granddaughter, who, having been born to Alexander's daughter and the King of Norway, was known as the Maid of Norway. But catastrophe and calamity, she had died on her way to Scotland, and Scotland was left with no royal family. No bad thing, I hear you say, but in those days, the consequences were far more than who looks after some over-pampered corgis. A kingdom needed a king. Now, realistically, there were two men who had a reasonable claim to the throne. Robert Bruce, yeah, not that guy, but...
You know, I have a question. If it's a queen, why don't they call it a queendom? I know that's gonna sound really silly. It does, but if it's a queen, why doesn't it change to a queendom, and then revert back to a kingdom? Because hey, if the queen is ruling, then it should be a queendom. Is it because of patriarchal dominance? You know what I mean? It's going to be a king. I'm being silly, but it's a little thought.
his granddad. And with an even stronger claim, if only slightly, was John Balliol, who was also supported by the Cummins, the most powerful family in Scotland. You know that thing where you apply for a job and you've got the qualifications and you're pally with somebody in the HR department? So why had all these Scots come here? The They wanted somebody to adjudicate between those two potential kings, knowing that when one or other didn't get their way, there may be trouble ahead. They wanted the arbitrator to have enough military muscle so that the parties, both of whom had lands in England, would fall in line. Plus, Edward was a good guy. Knows the law, stickler for detail, honest broker. He wouldn't do you a bad turn. Would he? What did Edward want? Well, he wanted to turn this from a friendly arbitration between two parties into the judgment of a group by a superior. That meant getting more than two claimants involved, getting those claimants to accept his overlordship, and getting the court of judgment to sit in England rather than Scotland. So here in Norham Castle, so Edward looked north to the Scots, saying, "Come over here, it's so lovely here, let's settle things here." Across there, the Scots said, "No, no, no, you come over here. This is a Scottish dispute to be settled in Scottish lands and courts." So there's a bit of a standoff until eventually the Scots came over here. Then Edward says, "Well, for my judgment to have any authority, I kinda need to have authority over you. So if you could just acknowledge me as your overlord, we can get on with things." Now, Robert Bruce clicked the box to agree the terms and conditions like he was buying a Kindle book off Amazon. John Balliol wasn't so keen. Now, you might doubt me on this, but trust me, if you've been following the channel, then you'll know that each month I tend to have a conversation with an expert that can be viewed on the Patreon member pages. And I discuss the events that took place here in a fantastic hour-and-a-half long conversation with the expert on the subject, Dr. Fiona Watson, a friend of the channel incidentally. If you want to get a real insight, then why not click the white tab up there to become a Patreon member and watch the whole conversation. With Robert Bruce on board, Edward brings in 11 more claimants, including the King of Norway, the daddy of that dead maid in Norway. When John Balliol and the Cummins saw that the only way that they could win was to have a seat at the table, they fell into line too. But to qualify an English king to rule in Scottish matters as a judge rather than an arbiter, one more thing was needed.
Wow, politics took over. My man went there not to arbitrate, but to dominate pretty much. And it's the same old thing all through history, you know. There's one person that wants to rule everything for where he's from. And it doesn't matter race, country, color, creed, you know. People will, they'll put their politics up in there, you know what I mean?
The community of the realm would have to also agree that Edward was overlord of Scotland. The bishops, knights and nobility on that northern shore were going to have to accept his authority. That's when Edward ran into trouble. The Bruces might go for it. The ragtag of other claimants with little real chance and often even less connection to Scotland might go for it. Scotland's most powerful family and their nominee might even reluctantly accept. The community of the realm said no. Eventually, a deal was struck. Edward could be overlord of Scotland for the period of the deliberation. That would make things nice and legal, and we could achieve what we're trying to achieve. But then, power had to revert to its rightful place, the people of Scotland. You probably know what happened next. Inside these walls, Edward and his legal team considered, pondered, reflected. And when the deliberations were over, the decision was in favour of John Balliol. Then It was just a case of doctoring the documents that limited his overlordship to the term of arbitration, and Edward was overlord of Scotland. What would have happened if the Bruces hadn't caved so quickly? If the whole community of Scotland had all stood together on the banks of the Tweed against Edward's demands? If the whole nation had shown solidarity, how might things have been different? This was the high water point of Edward's interventions in Scotland. He got what he wanted politically, but with no violence, and just a tiny bit of forgery. It was a cost-effective conquest indeed, at least in the short term. It was the basis of Edward's subsequent humiliation of John Balliol, invasion of Scotland, and years of decimation and ravaging of this whole area, both north and south of the border. The days of happy harmony across the Tweed were gone. Much more was to come, and you can be sure we'll come back to Edward of England before this border trip's over. If you'd like more stories from the Scotland-England border, then there's one.
Wow. That was the beginning of the wars, man, you know. One guy decided, you know, I want the power, you know, for my people or for my own ego or whatever. But, you know, that's interesting. I'm going to have to keep watching these English-Scottish border videos here. You know, thank you all for watching this with me. I'll leave a link in the description to the video that to this video. I'll also leave a link to in the description to the video that I spoke of earlier in this video, so that you guys could check that out too. Now I hope you guys are having a great weekend, because I'm watching these on Saturday. You know, it's my day off. I'm chilling. I'm relaxing and take. You know what I mean? Hopefully you guys are doing the same. You all take care. All right. Cool runnings.